retired military from retired intelligence, semi-publicly whispered from current military, certainly from politicians, even from academics. Man, it is time to retaliate. These people hit children on a very religious Russian Orthodox holiday,
Mm.
Pentecost Sunday for the Russian Orthodox, a day that is a national holiday.
Yes, and this pressure that Putin faces is something that Americans are not privy to because we're told that Putin is this dictator who controls everything, doesn't listen to anybody. He is ultra hawk. He's bent on recreating the Soviet Union. All these
Right.
fictions that
Right.
are created to justify warmongering against Russia. But in
Have you
reality,
been reading the letters of Lindsey Graham lately? I'm just busting your chops, but that's what they do believe. You're
of
right.
course,
Go ahead,
of course,
please.
and we don't, and because no one cares about actually studying Russia, and there are very few scholars left willing to speak the truth about it. My late mentor, Stephen F. Cohen, would always point this out that, inside the Russian political spectrum, Putin is actually relatively moderate. He's been facing pressure for a long time to do something about Ukraine. There were factions in Russia that were very upset. He did not go all the way in 2014. And he agreed to example the Minsk Accords, which ended the war that broke out after the U.S. backed coup. There are many voices in Russia who thought that was a capitulation, that was weakness, and that basically Russia should have wiped out the Ukrainian army and stopped by force the attacks on the Donbass. Putin tried to give negotiations a chance, and look where that got him. So he does face pressure from the more hawkish elements inside Russia. So far, I think he's held them at bay. But who who knows with politics and the way things go? I mean,
Right.
that's why it's so important. And I know many guests on your show make this point a lot. It's so important from our point of view just to do everything we can to minimize the risk. But what's the Biden administration doing? It's maximizing them.
Makes me wonder if Joe Biden, somehow thinks it will enhance his reelection if he's a wartime president. If 4 months from now, September or October, there are American troops there and he's rallying everybody around the flag. Boy, he should take a lesson from LBJ and what happened to him in 1968. All right.
Well, Judge, let me say too. Another lesson to draw is how escalation happens. Because right now there was a report on CNN this week saying that Biden is considering lifting restrictions on the deployment of U.S. military contractors. And just
Yes.
look at the recent history of Iraq and Afghanistan. When there's a lot of pressure at home to pull back troops from those countries, the Bush and Obama administrations authorized increased deployment of military contractors, which became sort of a parallel U.S. Army inside of these countries, Iraq and Afghanistan. It looks like now Biden, if the CNN report is correct, is going in that direction. So that's another step up the escalation ladder. And they might convince themselves, okay, it's military contractors, will limit their deployment. But that's the point with these moves. Every time you escalate one step up, you create the opportunity to advance to the next step. And military contractors being deployed does not have a very good history. Just look at Iraq and Afghanistan.
All right. So military contractors are private individuals paid a lot of money by companies usually run by ex-military and ex-intelligence. The guys themselves are almost always ex-military or ex-intelligence. Gee, how well did that work in Iraq, Joe? How well did it work in Afghanistan, Joe? I don't mean to demean the office by calling him Joe. I'm just so frustrated as you are with it, Aaron. Um, Not too long ago, Joe Biden came out with an idea that he says was the Israeli proposal for a three-part ceasefire leading to a termination of the hostilities in Hamas. Admiral Kirby said in one famous clip that we ran over and over again, it was an Israeli proposal, it was an Israeli proposal, it was an Israeli proposal. Cy Hirsch has demonstrated conclusively it was concocted in the West Wing, mainly in the Biden reelection campaign, but they wanted to sort of put pressure on Prime Minister Netanyahu. Netanyahu rejected it because he would lose Smotrich and Ben Gvir and the extremists in his government if he were to embrace it. He has said many times he doesn't embrace it. Lo and behold, Yoav Gallant, the Israeli defense minister, is it yesterday or today, Chris? Today, said in the Pentagon the following.
I'm standing here in Washington as Israel's Minister of Defense to say the following. We stand firmly behind the President's deal, which Israel has accepted, and now Hamas must accept. But let it be known that our war is not with the people of Gaza. Our war is not with the people of Lebanon. Our war is against Hamas, against Hezbollah, and their backers, the Iranian regime.
Then why did you slaughter 35,000 innocent civilians? It's probably more than that in Gaza. Okay, let me correct myself. That was yesterday, not today. Before you even respond, here is President Biden announcing this so-called peace proposal. This is about 3 weeks ago.
The first phase would last for 6 weeks. Here's what it would include: a full and complete ceasefire, a withdrawal of Israeli forces from all populated areas of Gaza, release of a number of hostages, including women, the elderly, the wounded, in exchange for release of hundreds of Palestinian prisoners. During the 6 weeks of phase one, Israel and Hamas would negotiate the necessary arrangements to get to phase two. Then phase two would be an exchange for the release of all remaining living hostages, including male soldiers. Israeli forces would withdraw from Gaza, and as long as Hamas lives up to its commitments, a temporary ceasefire would become, in the words of the Israeli proposal, the cessation of hostilities permanently, end of quote. Finally, in phase three, a major reconstruction plan for Gaza would commence, and any final remains of hostages who've been killed would be returned to their families. That's the offer that's now on the table.
So he clearly said it's an Israeli proposal. We're going to play Foreign Minister Gallant one more time. You'll hear a different characterization of it with respect to its origins, but he will claim, contrary to Netanyahu, that it's accepted. So, Chris, Foreign Minister Gallant again.
I'm standing here in Washington as Israel's Minister of Defense to say the following. We stand firmly behind the President's deal, which Israel has accepted, and now Hamas must accept. But let it be known that our war is not with the people of Gaza. Our war is not with the people of Lebanon. Our war is against Hamas, against Hezbollah, and their backers, the Iranian regime.
I don't want to nitpick, but it's very important. Is this an Israeli proposal, as Biden and Kirby have claimed? Or is this an American proposal, as Foreign Minister Gallant said? I'm asking you a lot because you know a lot. Does Prime Minister Netanyahu still have the power to say no? And how can the defense minister say yes? Aaron.
Well, yes, it's very confusing. What I think you have here is a tactical disagreement between Biden and Netanyahu over how to pretend to prolong the war. This is obviously a U.S. creation. The idea that Israel authored a proposal that its own prime minister has repeatedly rejected is a joke. And I think Gallant is taking the Biden side here, that basically their proposal says, or their version of the proposal, the Biden-Gallant version of the proposal says that we will have a cessation of hostilities. There will be a full release of hostages, but they added a clause in there about how basically if they determine that Hamas is not acting in good faith with its responsibilities, primarily in freeing the hostages, then they have the ability to resume. I think for Netanyahu, he doesn't even want to submit himself to those kinds of conditions. He just wants the unrestrained right to continue carrying out mass murder and destroying Gaza. He doesn't even want to
controls the Israeli IDF and the Israeli government. If the foreign minister says yes and the prime minister says no, which is it?
Well, so Gallant, the defense minister, he has some power, but ultimately it's Netanyahu. He's the person in charge here, I think. He's the person who's, Biden admitted is prolonging this war on purpose for his own political fortunes.
Right.
Gallant, I think if he was in charge, then they would accept the Biden version and there wouldn't be this issue. But Netanyahu keeps throwing them under the bus. He doesn't want to accept any constraints. That's why he also threw Biden under the bus when he complained about a pause in one shipment of U.S. weapons to Israel. So, but what I think ultimately here is a tactical difference, because I don't think Biden and Gallant want a permanent end to the war. I think they differ over how to pretend to want that. Netanyahu doesn't want to pretend at all. Doesn't want to honor any sort of theoretical right to impose constraints on Israel's death machine, and Gallant and Biden are willing to pretend. And to that point, Gallant says our war is not with the people of Gaza. This is the same person who immediately after October 7th said that he's ordered a complete siege of Gaza, no electricity, no food, no fuel, no water. We're fighting human animals.
Right.
That's Gallant. So when he says we're not fighting a war against the people of Gaza, when he's ordered a complete siege of them, when he's ordered a fundamental war crime against them, it's a farce. And that's why I don't take what he says about the ceasefire deal seriously. And that's why practically we're seeing warnings like this week that 500,000 people in Gaza face starvation because of Yoav Gallant's orders for a siege.
Let me, before we go, prevail upon your knowledge of Israeli politics. Is Netanyahu continually in trouble with the public and with the legal system? Was there another allegation of corruption against him which could mature into a criminal prosecution once he leaves office?
Judge, I have to plead ignorance on that. I don't know, actually. I don't follow Netanyahu's corruption troubles as much as, say, Max Blumenthal does. He would know the answer to that.
Okay.
I do know that he's faced, he's got the problems with the judicial reform, trying to basically weaken the Supreme Court. That was a subject of huge demonstrations before October 7th. And he's got, a series of corruption allegations involving him and his wife. In terms of one other potential scandal, I'm sorry, I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, no, I'll ask Max. It has to do with some procurement of submarines, and I'm not sure what the allegation is, but it's a relatively new allegation that came out within the past 3 or 4 days. Finally, just to give you something to chuckle about, we thought that Kirby was off the wall. Here's General Pat Ryder, the official spokesperson of the Pentagon. I mean, this goes on for 3 or 4 minutes. We'll only play about 45 seconds. Watch how he answers, quote unquote, legitimate bona fide press questions.
Did the Secretary receive any commitment or assurances from the Israeli Defense Minister to reduce civilian casualties?
I'm not going to be able to go into more details than what I provided in that readout there, Idris.
That it's a priority for the Israelis as well?
I'm not going to, again, characterize Minister Gallant's words.
Can you tell me what was the impetus for Secretary Austin's call with the Russian defense minister?
Thanks, Laura. I'm not going to have anything to provide beyond what I read out at the top.
Another war between Hezbollah and Israel could easily become a regional war.
Yeah, again, I'm not going to speak for Minister Gallant.
I wish Max were there, because he would stand up and say, what the hell are you here for if you can't answer anything? All right, I just wanted you to chuckle a little bit. You don't have to weigh in on all that stuff. Aaron, it's a pleasure to be with you, my dear friend. Your knowledge, as I've said before, and I'll say it again, is encyclopedic. Thank you very much for your time. We'll see you again next week. All the best.
Much appreciated. Thank you, Judge.
Thank you. Coming up shortly, 5:30 Eastern, Anya Parampil on all of these things we just spoke about with Aaron Mate. We'll see you shortly. Judge Napolitano for Judging Freedom.